All right, we're going live, by the way.
All right.
All right. Well, we are live. It may take a few minutes for everyone to see, but we are live streaming this long-awaited debate about Marshall football, really. And if it kind of ventures into a little bit deeper of herd athletics, so be it. But this kind of started as just a little bit of Twitter back and forth. We have a lot of fun on Twitter, of course. And we seem to spur a lot of discussion. There are a lot of heated feelings and passions that start digging deep when viewpoints differ. And this idea kind of came about, and here we are. I'm glad that Trace and Aaron decided they wanted to do this. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be really informative. I'm anxious to see the thought processes and ideas that are going to come out. So you guys know, regular listeners to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast already know Trace. He is our regular resident herd co-host, but joining us for this live stream, and which will ultimately be a podcast episode, we have managing editor of Herd Nation, Aaron Perkins, joining the show. We appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No, you are quite welcome, sir. We feel fortunate that you decided to do this. I wanted to make very clear from the outset that this is in no way, shape, or form a setup. We wanted to keep this as genuine as it could be, because we think it's going to be a lot of fun. So we've got 8 questions that the guys have submitted and agreed upon talking about. So there are no surprises. We're not throwing any haymakers and nothing out of left field. Pretty standard format. I guess we're going to alternate questions. Each participant will get 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes, uninterrupted to give an answer to that question. Then the other participant will have up to 3 minutes, uninterrupted, and then we'll just have open debate after they've each had their opportunity to say their piece without being interrupted. So if you guys are ready, we're going to get going. Last night, unbeknownst to the Twitterverse, I tweeted out this random looking tweet that said, "Settle this, heads and tails." And what they didn't know they were voting on was who was going to go first tonight. So in a close, I think it was 53% to 47%, the heads won it. So we're going to lead off with one of Aaron's questions, which means Trace will answer first, and he'll get up to 3 minutes, or until he's made his point if it's less than 3 minutes. And then Aaron will have an opportunity to respond, and we'll go from there. So let's just start right out of the gate, because you've got a really great first question. Aaron asked, why isn't 8-4 good enough for Marshall, Trace? Why isn't 8-4 good enough? So I'm going to mute my mic, and I'm going to mute Aaron's mic, and we're going to start the clock right now.
Well, I mean, that's kind of a double-edged question. I mean, you always, for a program, one of your goals, of course, is to have winning records every year. And, for the most part, Marshall's able to do that, and that's really good. But at the same time, after a while, it's just like, all right, we want some more a little bit. We want more here. I mean, that's kind of selfishness in a lot of ways. I mean, fans can be kind of like that. But, but to back that up a little bit more, after Marshall won their first Conference USA title after the 2014 season, Doc said the standard that they have to be at now is a championship standard. And to read a quote from a recent Grant Traylor article, actually, I thought it was really, really well done towards the end of the year after the bowl game, I think is when it was. The last quote of the last paragraph of that article says, "Marshall is not at the championship level that Holiday has set as the standard, and there is work to be done to push the herd into that conversation." And, I think Grant really did. I mean, he does a great job. And I think he really hit the mark with that. I mean, there's a lot of things that Marshall does well. It's just if you set that bar that high and you don't reach, the championship level, which, they haven't reached in over 5 years, then it's got to be viewed as a disappointment, because, that's a high bar, but like, that's what they're trying to set the standard of, and that's what we thought it was set at. But they're not winning championships. That's pretty much why 8-4 is not good enough for most of the fan base. Like I said, winning records and playing in bowls and so forth is important for the program, and of course, but like when you set the bar at a championship level, that's what most fans feel it has to be at. And there's a lot of things, going into that. Like since 2014, there's only 7 teams in Conference USA that have not played for a conference title. Those being Charlotte, FIU, Old Dominion, UTSA, Rice, UTEP, and Marshall. I mean, me personally, I don't like being in that company at all. I mean, there's some decent, some of those teams are starting to rise a little bit. FIU showing some flashes, Charlotte shows some flashes this year. But I mean, for the most, like Rice and UTEP and UTSA, I mean, those are kind of bottom dwellers. You don't really want to be in the same category as far as, lack of championship success with teams like that. A lot of people will look at, this is a forever ago, but people always look at Doc's record against teams with winning records. That's a lot of fans like going to that. I mean, it's not that. I mean, that's a little bit skewed because, I mean, some of those are against Power 5 teams that are really good. And I mean, you're not really going to beat some of those teams. But, I mean, 21-39 record against teams that finished the particular season that they played the herd that are above 500. So that's 18 games under 500. That's, 3-12 against the Power 5. No top 25 wins in 10 years. I mean, people look at that kind of stuff, but I mean, for me, that's not really what it comes down to. What it comes down to is just the fact that they don't have very many championships, just the one. So I think if they could, a championship would do absolute wonders for Doc's perception with the fan base, in my opinion. I think that would go a long, long way. But I mean, only time will tell. I mean, it's going to be a very interesting next year or two. So we'll see how it goes.
All right, that's 3 minutes. Aaron, your response.
That's good stuff. First off, I want to preface it by saying, I'm not happy with not winning championships. I just think that when you're looking at our program in Conference USA, sometimes we think we are bigger, better, badder than the conference we're in. And I don't know. I mean, that's good in theory, but that's not the numbers you just gave. No one in this conference is achieving those levels. You just said that 7 teams have not played in a championship since 2014, correct? So 7 teams have. Only 7 have in 5 years. So 10 potential opponents, who could have played in it, and 7 did. So that's pretty spread out and even. If you take it back 1 year further, and say 6 years, so 12 potential teams could be in those championship games, and you add Marshall to it, so that's 8 of 12. So I think it's just a very even conference, and at times we forget what we're doing in this conference. So some quick numbers I looked at earlier today. We've since 2014, and that's the year I went back to, not because that's the year we won, but that's the year that nearly the entire conference was back in together. La Tech was here, Western was here, Middle was here. Since that point, we're 31-17 in the conference, tied with Western Kentucky, behind just La Tech. That's it. Arguably, La Tech is playing in the weaker side when you have teams like, Rice and UTEP and UTSA who haven't even won 20 games yet in that time period. And I just think we're, 8-4 may not be, I just don't think it's mediocre. I keep coming back to that word that just drives me nuts. I hear the word mediocre. To me, mediocre is 5-7, 6-6, year in, year out, and you look at what we're doing, if you take out 16, and I know you can't, but we win nearly 6-7 games every year in this conference. And we always slip up, and that's a shame, but I don't know that you can necessarily put that on Doc. And when I ask why isn't 8-4 good enough, I'm not necessarily saying why isn't 8-4 good enough for Marshall. Why isn't 8-4 good enough for us to approve of our head coach? And to me, what he has done here, I could go all the way back to the very first day when he put the green coat on and he stood in front of everybody and he said, and I've repeated this 1,000 times, I'm sure people are sick of hearing it. He promised us that he was going to build us a program. He didn't say he was going to win championships. He didn't say he was going to have a great team here and there. He said, I'm going to build you a program. There's no doubt in my mind right now, today, if Doc Holliday had to walk away from this program, whoever steps in here is stepping in to a program that he built for us. And I think we should. I get a little angry and irritated when people aren't proud of that. That's my take on why I think 8-4 should be good enough at times. I think we need to be better in other times. I'm sorry.
No, that's right. That's good. That's 3 minutes. You guys can. I'm gonna unmute all the mics and have at it. Continue your discussion.
No, I think he made some really good points. That's especially about building the program. Now, that's one thing. Even though, like, if you're not particularly happy about not winning championships or playing for championships, I don't think there's any way you can deny that Doc's not built a really stable program. I mean, he's cleaned the program up. I think everybody knows that. He doesn't put up with any crap, for lack of a better term. I mean, he's really done a great job as far as building a program and building a culture. There's no doubt about that, because that was something that was lacking a lot in the previous regime before Doc got here. That was lacking. I mean, they just didn't have the most stable program in the world, but now they definitely have a more stable program. The floor of what they should succeed is 6, 7, 8 wins, and I think that's a good place to be in. But after a while, like I said, it's just I just got to keep going back to it. I mean, there's so many fans that think that Marshall's. I mean, there's a lot of kind of entitledness with Marshall fans. Like, they just think that all they have to do is show up and then they're going to win a championship. I mean, if we know sports, we know that's not how it goes. But if he could just win, I mean, just one more title in the next couple of years or next year, I mean, that would just be huge. I think that would really improve a lot of the opinions of Doc. But, I mean, it's going to be a tough task next year because, I mean, they got a really tough schedule. So I don't know. But I definitely agree with your program building point.
There's not a lot to really rebut to that right there. I think we both said our piece there, and you definitely countered everything that I said there perfectly. And I there is that floor at 8-4, and I know we lost in a bowl game, but that doesn't happen very often. So that's why I'm leaving that out for the sake of this conversation, and it makes my numbers look better. So I can't, but it's still. I think, we look up the road here, and I don't want to compare ourselves to Ohio University at all, but they're giving contract extensions to Frank Solich. I think we made a big mistake as a program, and I've became a Mike Hamrick fan, and in what he's done here. I mean, how can you not look around our campus and not be happy with what he's done, from buildings and what's inside the trophy cases and everything? I mean, he's done a great job. And, but I think the one mistake he made is not extending Doc a couple years ago, and not because not because I'm trying to say Doc should coach here for the next 5 years. I hope he does, because I hope he's successful enough to the point that he has to. But I think I think we're probably losing a recruiting battle or two right now because we have a coach with no contract, and I don't think that's a good thing. And I think fans sometimes overlook that, and they think that, and this is probably going to come in on another question where I'm going to have to repeat myself, but going out on a tangent here, the FIU game, I don't know what fans think they got out of that turnout. There was nothing positive came out of that, from recruits seeing it to people seeing it on TV to, okay, so you want somebody gone, not giving him money is not going to help. But, I could go down that road for a while. And we'll touch it on that on one of your questions later on.
I look at that question and I don't, I'm trying to remain out of this conversation, but I look at that question, why isn't 8-4 good enough? And what makes me want to do is throw a couple of extra words on the end of that, because I recall Marshall using the mantra, we play for championships. So when I see that, what I want to say is, why isn't 8-4 good enough to play for championships? And I think that's the question I want to have answered. Is that good enough in the current Conference USA? Do you think 8-4 is good enough to consistently play for conference championships?
I mean, it was for middle in 2018, weren't they 8-4 and heading into the conference championship game?
I mean, I don't mean once here and there. Do you think consistently 8-4 can do?
No.
Okay, so we agree upon that. So maybe that to me is why from a broad strokes perspective, 8-4 isn't good enough just because you can't consistently land in that conference title game at 8-4.
Well, you got to think too. I mean, think of just some of the most recent conference champions. I mean, FAU was 11 wins this year. Yeah. FAU was 11 wins a couple years ago. So many teams. I feel like most every Conference USA champion, Western Kentucky, a bunch of those teams have pretty much all at 10, 11, 12 wins. So, like, it's a pretty high bar. I mean, to be like, in that level. But
when we won it, we had
13.
13 wins, and so there always is. But you kind of came back to something right there, and you just named multiple different teams. It's like every year there's that one team that that runs up to the front, and we haven't ran up to the front except for one time, but we're always up here. And consistently, we are there. And I think there just comes a point in time where, and I think my question was more geared towards the Doc side of things. Mm-hmm. Why isn't 8-4 good enough for our fans to? Why the backlash at 8-4 for our head coach when he's doing more than any other coach in any other program consistently right now in our conference? He's one championship away from being right there with the rest of them. He this year he got another, monkey off his back by beating, the mantra that he couldn't beat good teams is gone. I mean, he knocked off 2 10-win teams, one on the road and a 9-win team in the same season. I went back to a couple previous regimes and can't find that ever happened before. And it happened this year. And, it stinks that it kind of goes back, and I know we're definitely going to touch on this on my last question about Doc and it's at the very beginning of Doc's career. But it seems like Doc has always been in a position of a true West Virginian. We're always fighting uphill. It seems like we're always, looking up at everyone else. And every time that he's been on the verge, it's like, and I know you create your own breaks and you create your own luck, but luck has always been against that man since he's been here from day one, literally nearly from his first game. It's been like that. And we can touch on that later on.
Well, that was a hell of a good start. I got to say, that was a really good I like that. So, look, Trace's first question, actually, you might have to help me explain this because all you sent me was the direction of the program. So, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by the direction of the program?
More like how do you feel it's going? Like, the direction that it's going in. Are you, happy with it, sad with it, stuff like that.
So in parentheses here, it says Doc's future. Are you asking me, do I think, or does Aaron think, do you think he'll be extended, or do you think once this contract is done, he's done? Is that what you mean by that? Okay.
Basically.
So there we go. So what is the direction of the program? Are you satisfied with the direction of the program? And speaking to Doc's future, do you think he will get an extension, or do you think he is truly in the final year of his contract at Marshall? Aaron, take it away.
I will start off by saying, in my opinion, I think unless this year is just an absolute dumpster fire, and I do not see that happening, I think Doc will coach here as long as Doc Holliday wants to coach here. And personally, I think both he and our athletic director have definitely earned that. And I don't think it's something where they have they should be you used the word earlier today, entitled. Our fan base can be entitled. I don't think he's entitled to that. I think he's legitimately earned that. And when you really strip back all the emotions, and I have to do that too. I'm biased in the opposite way that others are biased, and I get that. But I think the program and the team right this second I don't think we're going to miss a beat from this past year. I don't think I don't think an 8-4 regular season was bad. I think we're going to build on that. We lost some pieces, but if you go back, one thing Doc has always been very solid at, and it's not always the number of stars beside the guys' names. And I know that's something that we've prided ourselves in and having these top-rated classes in Conference USA. But he always seems to evenly fill both sides of the ball and each position. And the way he worked this particular recruiting class, hitting some junior college guys, still hitting some junior college guys, as you're going to see over the next few weeks. Not meaning for a shameless plug there or anything, but there will be, some pretty cool stuff the next few weeks. And he's rebuilding those positions that maybe need depth. And, that's one thing that I like that he's done. And like I said in the previous question, I feel that, he could ride off into the sunset tomorrow, and it's not going to be like and this is going to sound, I loved Bob Pruitt. Okay. I never had, I was a big fan of Bob Pruitt, but, some of the things have happened since then can kind of rub you the wrong way. But, when he left, that program was a mess from top to bottom. It was an absolute mess. Doc Holliday could leave right this second, and the next person that comes in is going to flourish, not because they're a better coach than him, but because he left the cupboard unbare. And again, back to the program. He's built us a program. We should all be proud of that program. And I think we should be proud of him. And I don't care to tell anybody that. I see nothing that man has done or hasn't done that deserves the backlash he gets on a daily basis via social media, via the people standing in the stands, and I could go on there. I'm probably coming up against my 3 minutes, but he I think it's going in the right direction. I think he bounced back from 16, and he bounced back. He had one bad year. Southern Miss crashed a few years ago record wise, and they were down for a bit. And they're still not fully back. And he brought us back, and he stayed there. And I like that, and I think he's earned the right to tell us when his last game's going to be.
All right. Well, Trace?
Yeah, I mean, to start with the program, just the state of it, I mean, I think it's in a solid enough state. But for me, now I've kind of been thinking this over the last, year or two, I'd say. I feel like a lot of things have stagnated with the football program. I feel like that's what I think one of the last podcasts we did. I feel like, I don't know if I said it or not. I know I've said it to other people, but I just don't feel like, personally speaking, and maybe I'm off base, maybe I'm just reaching, but I don't feel like there's as much fire and passion, or not passion, but fire, desire, will to win, will to succeed at the highest level. I don't feel like there's quite enough of that left. I mean, in Doc's first few years, he was still a new head coach. He had a ton of edge to him, and fire and passion for the game and stuff. I mean, he still has the passion, but you could just see, you could hear it in his voice. He had a big time edge. That was his first ever head coaching job. He wanted to go out there and prove himself, and he turned Marshall from a very mediocre Conference USA football program to a 13-1, national contender. I mean, that he did that within 5 years. So you can't take that away from him. He built a program tremendously. But since then, I just feel like, personally speaking, that it's kind of stagnated. I feel like there's some complacency going on with, the athletic department. I feel like they're kind of just resting on their laurels, so to speak. I mean, I feel like they've kind of feel like, well, we won the title, we've had success. Now it's just like, let's kind of maintain. And I feel like complacency and just trying to maintain is not really the best way to go, if indeed that's the way that it's going. I mean, like I said, it might just be my thinking, but for some reason, something just strikes me that that's what's going on. The fan support, like we talked about. I mean, that FIU game was downright abysmal and embarrassing. Like, I've seen Hurricane High School games with much bigger crowds than that. I mean, it was not good. No excuse for that, even if the weather was bad, which it was horrible. But there should never be, as far as I'm concerned, there should never be under 20,000 or so in that stadium. I mean, that's just the way I look at it, and it was bad. And a lot of that had to do with the weather, but a lot of that had to do with the fact that fans aren't real happy with the state of the program and Doc and everything. But I mean, his contract's up, June of 21, I think is when it is, 2021. So it's not too much longer, really. So that's the $1 million question. It's like, do you extend him? If Marshall goes, let's just say 6-6, and then loses a bowl game, they're 6-7. At that point, or worse, at that point, do you extend him or not? That's the question. And in my opinion, if he has a bad year, or if they have a losing record, I just don't see how you could justify, extending him. I mean, he's done a lot of great things, but like after a while, it's just things eventually run their course. I mean, look at some of the other programs around the country. I mean, these aren't really fair, maybe not fair examples, but I mean, Texas cut ties with Mac Brown, LSU cut ties with Les Miles. Jimbo Fisher was out at Florida State. I mean, a lot of guys that were successful coaches eventually, they wanted to part ways with just because they felt like the time had come. I mean, it's not that Doc's a bad coach. It's just eventually I think things just kind of run their course in anything in life. And I think that's kind of maybe where they're heading. So I don't know. That's just kind of what I'm feeling.
All right. Mics are off. Or our mics are on.
Yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying, with some of that stuff. I guess my question would be, why? That's the answer that I can't seem as a fan to grasp is why 7-4. You need to win and have a legitimate. I mean, Southern Miss. It's not like FAU was playing, UTEP. They're playing Southern Miss. Anything could have happened. It was senior day, and that baffled me, and I don't think anybody could ever give me a valid, and not that I don't deserve. I'm not asked. I don't have a head big enough to think that I deserve an answer as to why, but I could never come up with. I don't think anyone could ever give me, other than a reason why they didn't come because of football or Doc Holliday related. You have a wedding to go to, your kid's sick. I'm 46 now. I'm not the way I used to be when I was 20, when I ripped on everybody for everything for not coming. But, there comes a point now where, being a fan is being a fan. And this isn't a professional sport. It's not life or death. You come to a game because you like your team. And, your team has a chance to win a championship, which is what, we play for championships, right? Well, we play for championships, not necessarily in a championship game. I mean, that was playing for a championship that day. And nobody came. And that was sad on a lot of levels.
So do you like the direction that we're going, or do you think, because, I listen to what you're saying and you say, why change? And I'm thinking, so do some fans want to change just for the sake of having a change? No real reason other than they're mad and they're like, you know what, let's switch it up. Let's see how it is. So are you guys like legitimately okay with the direction of the program, or are you on the boat that I'm not okay with it? I need something new.
Well, I think you said the key word there, okay. And I feel like that's just, for me, I feel like it's just okay. It's just kind of okay right now. I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, because I'd rather be okay than be a complete just trash program. But I mean, at the same time, it's like Marshall's got too many things going in their favor. I mean, I know a lot of people will say that they always overexceed their budget, and they don't have a lot of money to throw around, and that's definitely true. But I mean, Marshall's got a lot of things in their favor. I mean, look at all the facilities they have. Look at all the history and the tradition and the fan support. The core fans. I mean, that's what I've always said. The core fan base of Marshall, like the diehard fans, that's as good as you'll find in college athletics to me. I mean, and they don't have nearly as many as a lot of programs, but I mean, I feel like the core diehard fans for Marshall that's about as good as you can get, because I mean, there's a lot of passion there, and in some ways, whether you think they're right or wrong, their passion comes out in negative, connotations towards Doc or towards the program, because like they have such a high standard because of how much success Marshall had. I mean, I don't know. It's just a very kind of gray area, but like I think I don't think the program's in bad shape. Obviously, I just think every once in a while something needs a kick, a kick in the pants. I feel like we're kind of getting closer to that point, because I mean, he has been here 10 years. That's a long time. He's had a lot of success. He's done a great job of building a program, but after a while, like I said, it's just eventually everything, you have to move on. Eventually things can't just stay the same forever. I mean, at least in my opinion. So
you made a comment earlier on this question, I believe, about how many years he had left on his contract, and is this his last year? As a fan base going into this season, this upcoming season, you got to think one of two things is going to happen. He's either going to be gone, or he's going to win enough games to justify an extension. I don't think 6-6 necessarily would be in the people in the opinion of those who make decisions. I don't think that would necessarily be enough.
Yeah.
So as a fan, and I'm not, you'll be there. It's preaching to the choir with you. I know you're going to be at the game, at every game. But as a fan base, why not just come out every single game? What do you got to lose? You're either going to tell somebody bye at the end of the year that you, for some reason, no longer like, or you're going to see a successful year. I mean, don't you want him? Every Marshall fan should want him to get a contract extension, because that means he's continuing to win. And I guess that's the part where I become very dumb, because I can't fathom how someone would not want that. And you're talking about this hardcore group of fans, and they weren't there that last game.
No,
that's going to go into my next question. So, and lead into that a little bit. So,
yeah, actually, that's right where I was headed. So the next question is, why is it that Herd fans think only Marshall is supposed to improve in this Conference USA and not any other Conference USA team? Like, every other team is supposed to be terrible forever, and Marshall's the only one that's supposed to get good. When in fact, I'm going to expound on that. I'm going to give some context. I know you guys know this, but for people that may be listening later, Huntington's in a very, 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 let's call it recruiting deprived area. Yeah, we've got some really good players in and around that Cabell County area, but you're not going to compete with the athletes in South Florida. We all know that. We're not fooling anybody. You're not going to compete with the concentration of athletes in the Tidewater area in Norfolk. So that goes against Marshall. So why is it that that Herd fans think everybody's supposed to be terrible except for Marshall? Trace, lead us off.
That's an excellent question. I mean, when I saw that, I was like, you know what? That's a really good question.
It is a good question.
I think, though, it comes down to, at least for, like I said, kind of that entitled part of the fans, in the back of the psyche. And I think we all have that to an extent. I mean, I feel like most Marshall fans have that. Even if it's not on display, on full display, it's somewhere in the back of your mind somewhere, just because of all the, success Marshall's had. But I kind of just chalked it up as they think Marshall is so far ahead of some of these programs that even if those programs improve, they still shouldn't be on Marshall's level. I feel like that's what a lot of fans think. And an example of that would be like Charlotte, for example. Like, over the last 4 times Marshall's played Charlotte, Marshall's 2-2 against Charlotte. I mean, Charlotte's won 2 out of the last 4 against Marshall, including this year where they dashed Marshall's, conference title hopes, essentially. So, I mean, and Charlotte, like, they were always a bottom dweller when they first got to the conference because they were such a new program, and now they get to a bowl game and everything. So but even with them improving to, let's just say, a slightly above average Conference USA level, fans still think that Marshall should be leaps and bounds ahead of them. And I've made no bones about it. I think Marshall always should be beating Charlotte at this moment in time. Now, maybe in a couple, 2 or 3 years, Charlotte's going to improve and be an East Division contender. But right now, I just don't think Marshall should be losing to Charlotte. Now, I know there were some mitigating circumstances there with the weather, and it was on the road and stuff. But like we always say, Charlotte had to play in the same conditions, and they did a much better job with it. And, they have a young, energetic head coach that's pumping life into that program, Club Lit and all that other cool jobs and whatever. So, I don't know. I mean, I think that's really just what it kind of comes down to, is that they think Marshall's so far ahead of everybody else, at least most of the conference outside of maybe your Western Kentucky or your Louisiana Tech or your Southern Miss. They think they're so far ahead of all the other programs like the Floridas and the Old Dominions and the Charlottes that even if those programs get better from being completely horrible, then they think Marshall should still be much farther ahead of them. That's just kind of the best I could come up with. That's a really good question.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was a quick synopsis there in your reply.
You made a comment on the last question about you felt that Marshall's, I'm assuming you mean Mike Hamrick and the leadership levels, are resting on their laurels.
Yeah.
And I think that Mike Hamrick gets paid a lot of money to do a job for his alma mater. That's different. He's not at ECU. He's not at UNLV. He's at a place that he loves, he calls home, and he lives, eats, bleeds everything here. And I am not downing your opinion of thinking that he rests on his laurels. I don't know him personally very well, but he's not resting on his laurels. However, by the looks of, and the fact that people would even ask that question, and the fact you would think that was a really good question. So clearly that's a question that when you read it, you're like, makes sense. Fans are resting on their laurels. They think that Marshall should just roll their helmets out on the field. It's funny you mentioned Hurricane earlier. When I was in middle school, Hurricane beat the crap out of us all the time, and in every sport. And we beat them once. And I remember our coach saying, they thought they could just throw their Hurricane jerseys on the floor and beat us, and they didn't. And why fans think that when these guys are spending, I don't even want to say equal amounts of money. At times they're spending more money. They're in different areas of the country, where they're bringing in different people, and they have just as much right to win football games as we do. Every week 65 teams lose and 65 teams win, and we, for the most part, are on the right side of that way more often than not. 60 some odd % of the time since he's been here, we're on the good side of that. And when we come back to, I know I steered there for a second, but these other schools are trying to improve, and I think fans are kind of crazy for sitting there and thinking that they're not supposed to. And I think the fact that you think that we should beat Charlotte every single time we play them just because they're Charlotte is some of that type of thinking. No disrespect intended, but I don't think that's the way that a sport is played by humans and coached by humans and watched by humans. And we're there to watch it and root for our team that we love, period. I go back, I think of this every now and then, and this is a little off topic, but I get labeled the bad guy somehow because I'm, I guess, a little bit more vocal against, the way that I air quote fans. And I just think it's funny how I'm ridiculed, which is fine, for protecting or trying to defend a program that allegedly all of us love. And I just think that's kind of odd, but those teams are improving. We're improving. Conference USA is improving compared to where it could have been when these teams left. I think the teams they brought in are definitely doing what they're supposed to do, get better.
Yeah, I think had Conference USA decided to bring in a few different programs other than some of the ones that they did, we'd really be singing a different tune. Could you imagine if they would have brought in, the Arkansas states and the Appalachian states and even the Louisianas now? I mean, these are some teams that are winning a lot of ball games. Some of those teams down in Georgia are doing that too. You replace some of those weaker links, those UTEPs and things like that. And man, you talk about tough sledding. That would be tougher sledding. So if folks are screaming now, just imagine what it would be like had some of those top tier Sunbelt teams got the nod instead of some of these other Conference USA. I think Marshall fans have this thought process that if other teams are getting better, then we're not working hard enough. And I don't think that's not the case at all. We all know those boys are busting their butts every day, working hard. So you can't correlate, like everybody can rise, but the thought process by most people is, well, in order for somebody to get better, somebody's got to get worse. And I think that's what they're equating. If they're getting better, then we're getting worse. We should never lose to them.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's just the way I feel about it. That and 75 cents will get you a cup of coffee. So. All right. So next question, Trace. Here's a good one. Now, we don't have much future left. We're halfway through this tenure. So is Isaiah Green the quarterback of the future for Marshall? You got 2 years left.
2 years
so
left.
We're midway through the tenure of Isaiah Green. We would like to think, right? He's got 2 years as a starter, 2 years to go. So We'll see. Is Isaiah Green the quarterback of the future, Aaron?
It's 2 years left, and if I'm not mistaken, that's exactly the same number of Conference USA losses he's led us to in 2 years. Two. I think we're so used around here to having football teams that success involves 100% around the quarterback play, and that we're seeing. That's one thing I liked about. Well, I'll get to that in a minute. I think right now he's definitely the future. I think Grant Wells and Eli Sammons are both going to get a legit shot to beat him out. I think Grant Wells and Mr. Thompson got a legit shot to beat him out this year, and they didn't. I think that, can that be, why isn't Doc bringing in better quarterbacks? He brought in a guy that Phil Simms said was going to be good. And again, back to Doc's luck, bum shoulder. There we are. He's not playing. And that they wanted him to be the face of the program. You could go back to the preseason of 2018 and just look at the paraphernalia put out. The posters, the team posters, the schedule posters. There's Thompson, not Isaiah Green, and there was Isaiah over there on the field at the end, standing with the wide receivers, watching practice, coming in and performing week day in, day out. And he comes onto the field, and last year as a freshman, he led a very, come from behind win at Western. I think after we fell behind, nobody thought we would win that game. Mm-hmm. And he won that game. And then this year, he goes on the road. He beats Florida Atlantic. He comes back and beats Western Kentucky after getting up big. He helps to blow out Louisiana Tech. He holds off Ohio in on a drive of all drives. What a great drive to end. Was a 6-minute drive to end that game. Beat UCF. Even when he has lost, with a couple exceptions, Middle was a bad loss. 500 yards of offense. It stinks that we still lost and couldn't score, and I know that's the goal of it. But what he can do, I think, is what I saw. My biggest problem with him was last year we watched him lock in constantly, not necessarily lock in, but he knew he had Tyree Brady to throw to. We didn't run pass routes hardly. We were content with like Cato's freshman year. We knew we had Dobson to throw to. We threw it to him. He went up, made crazy catches. We won a ball game. That's what he did with Brady last year. He threw it up. Brady went up and made ridiculous catches, and we do what we do. This year, with the exception of, Boise, take the Boise game out. It was a really good team, and I really think Doc's goal in that game was to give us a chance to win at the end, and he did, and we didn't. So he definitely played that one very conservative. But take that game out. Cincinnati was just better than us, and he had a good first part of the season. And this is going to sound like sour grapes. So please don't take this way, because I was saying this while he was still a part of our team. Obi Obialo comes back, and it's like Tyree Brady came back. We stopped seeing the other guys. Brock Thompson was obsolete from that point. Corey Gamage went off and stood on the bench for a while. That passing game to the wide receivers left. He locked back in on Obi, threw the deep lollipop balls to Obi, and hoped Obi went and made plays. And I hope we're going to start coming back into next year. We're going to see what we were beginning to see the first part of this year, unless somebody beats him out. And if somebody beats him out, I think we're going to have a really good quarterback, because I think a third year Isaiah Green starting, how could you not want that? You get tired of that revolving door at that position, and he's done enough to win games, and now it's on him to take us to that next level. And if he can't do it, then I think a change will be made. But, I don't think Thompson was the answer this year. Even in the bowl game, he had that one drive. Those 2 throws he completed looked like he threw them out of the bottom of his hand, and they were caught off the the top of the field. But I think he's definitely our future right now, and hopefully that stays the case. Because if that's the case, like with Doc, if Doc gets an extension, that means we had a good year. If Isaiah is our future, then that means we had a good year. So right now, I think that's the case, but I really like Grant Wells. So I will say that he's fun to watch, and I think Eli is just a taller version of Grant Wells. So and he'll be here this spring to practice. So it's going to make for a fun 15 practices. I hope there's a lot of people there watching them and supporting that group, so they don't they can get that sour taste of that FIU game out of their mind.
So is Green the quarterback of the future, Trace?
Well, I mean, until somebody steps up, yes, he is. Because here's my thing with Green has always been just the consistency issue. That's been the problem. When he's playing well, he's playing really well. He's making some big time throws. I mean, you see. That's what aggravates everybody the most about it is you can see him make some really nice plays. I mean, you can see the guy run for almost 100 yards this year in a game. I mean, he started using his feet more. They started running him more. He made some big time throws. He had some really good wins. But then other games, it's just like, man, what is going on here? I just want to see. I know I do, and everybody else does. For Marshall fans, just want to see him play more consistently. I think I know I've said it at least twice on this podcast this last season, but for Marshall, the stat I looked up a while back was every time Marshall has won an FBS conference title, at least since they got back in the big leagues in '97, every time they've won an FBS conference title, the quarterback of that said team was no lower than second in their conference in passer efficiency rating. I think that's the level that kind of area is where Marshall has to, or Green has to get to. I mean, he's kind of, I don't know what he was this last year, but he's probably like in the 7, 8, 9 range probably. I mean, that's just not quite. I mean, I'll save a little bit more for this later, but that's not the level that you can really win a championship at, in my opinion. I mean, Green, he just has to put it all together. And I know we've said it, me and you both, Katie, have said this, that they need a quarterback's coach that can dedicate more time towards developing a quarterback. I mean, most teams don't have just one quarterback's coach, and that's the only position they have, as a coach. But I feel like that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world because, he could improve on his footwork, his mechanics, his pocket presence, and all that stuff. I mean, he's still a young guy for the most part, but he has played 2 years. So, I mean, after a while, you would have hoped to have seen more improvement. I mean, he kind of just stayed the same this past year compared to his freshman year. So, I mean, you just, at the end of the day, it's in there somewhere. You think that it's in there somewhere that he could be a championship caliber quarterback. You see flashes of brilliance. It's just eventually, when is it going to be put together consistently? Because that's the level that Marshall has to have it at. The Penningtons and the Catos and the Leftwiches and the Paytons and the Cressers and all those guys were elite, high caliber quarterbacks. And that's just kind of the level if Marshall wants to play and win championships. That's the level that it has to be at. And I mean, he's still got a ways to go in that. So hopefully a coach can kind of help, take him under his wing, maybe some more, maybe he can just improve on his own. I mean, I don't know. I just want to see him play more consistently because it's not just him though. I mean, this last year was not just him. The receivers didn't step up enough, for the most part. Obialu was out most of the year. He was their number one target heading into the year. So it's not all on Green, of course, but he takes some of the blame as well. But I just want to see more consistency. So by default, yeah, he is the quarterback of the future until otherwise.
Any response to that?
No, I mean, it's, makes perfect sense. Hard to argue against some of that stuff. He does need to go back. That's why I kind of went back to that first part of the year, excluding, those big games against Boise and Cincinnati. Those teams are just better than us, and that happens. But, he was really – the offense was different. The offense was different in summer practice this year. He was spreading it out. He was looking at all sides of the field. So it's clearly there. And who clamped it down? I think that being able to we go back to this resting on our laurels, resting on the laurels of having Obialo out there to throw the ball to and trust, and to a bit Armani Leveas and those guys. But I thought he managed. He put us in positions where, with the exception of middle, we should have been conference champions with him at quarterback. He did enough, I felt, even at Charlotte. I mean, we take the lead if Devin Miller holds on to a touchdown pass. I mean, it hit him between the 8 and the 3. Yep. And we take that lead. Who knows what happens? Maybe we deflate them. We win that. We're not losing to UAB. That team, we weren't going to lose that UAB team, period. So, there we are, one potential play. I hate to put it on a player, but if you're putting it on one, you're taking off another type of a thing. But I mean, that was a tough one to go down there and lose. It was that was one of the most miserable losses I've been a part of, was that one, except for that one in 2010 that we'll talk to at the end.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, no big deal. No, that game against Charlotte was one that Marshall just didn't have an answer for Victor Tucker. They didn't. They could not guard that guy. No. And I cannot recall their quarterback's name, but he had a huge, I don't even think it was a coming out party, because he had been playing well coming into that.
Yeah,
but he had a great game. It was a 2-man offense for Charlotte. They couldn't stop Tucker. LeMay was okay. I think he might have had 100 yards, but he really wasn't. He didn't rip it up like we thought this game would be. That game would have been in the rain. It is what it is.
Hey, you know what? That was their night, and that's their night that the 8,000 or 9,000 fans that they had in that stadium maybe that night are going to remember for a long time. And we have a lot of those nights too that we're going to remember. And again, that's what makes sports so awesome.
So that was they got bowl eligible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's a milestone. That's a watermark win for their program. Not because it was over Marshall, but because it got them bowl eligible for the first time ever.
Yeah, and that we're like that. We go even, and that's why I know that other fans, if you go around to some other message boards leading up to playing Marshall, they have utmost respect for Marshall, utmost respect for Doc Holliday, and we are still, it's kind of like, I'm a Dallas Cowboy fan, and America's team. And everybody likes to hate on them, and it's their big game of the year, and that's kind of the way Dallas or Marshall is in Conference USA. You go to these games and you look at the ticket, just log online before the season starts and scroll down and look and see what is the highest dollar ticket on that team's ticket stub for that year, and it's probably going to be our game, and that's the way it's treated every year. And we have to be. I don't think we were not ready for that game. I think we were. Just, man, couldn't. Everything that could have happened against us.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to move along to the next question, which is also an interesting kind of thing. I don't really know how you guys are going to answer this, but I'm interested to see. So, when will fans stop ripping on young Conference USA programs for being young in terms of history? So, I guess, when are they not young anymore? Is the question, or when have they won enough, or what do they have to do to stop being young? So, Trace, what do you got for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit it right there. I mean, I think that fans will stop, nagging on those programs when they reach, let's just say a conference championship level. I mean, FAU for the longest time was a laughing stock. I mean, that's what they were. I mean, everybody pretty much beat up on FAU for years. Then they get Lane Kiffin and some carryovers from the previous coach, and they win the conference with 11 wins. Then this last year, they win the conference with 11 wins. So you can't say FAU, you can't look down on them anymore. Now, that's just what it comes down to. I mean, even like UAB, I mean, I know it was a very tumultuous last few years for UAB because, the program shut down and they came back and got a million recruits and a million seniors and all the other stuff, and they were able to win the conference. And I mean, but for the longest time, I mean, how many years when Marshall played UAB in like the mid 2000s or the early 2010s were UAB just a complete, you wrote that down as a win every single year you looked at the schedule. it's not the same anymore. So like once those teams like that start reaching that kind of level, no, I don't think getting to a bowl game at 7-5 and losing a bowl game or winning a bowl game if you're like a Charlotte is necessarily earning respect. Now, is that a step in the right direction? Sure, it absolutely is. But I think I said on the wrap up of the Charlotte game, I think when we did that, when I said Charlotte's definitely moving in the right direction, there's no doubt about it. But at the same time, they haven't reached that direction yet. So like you can't quite say like, oh well, Charlotte's they're world beaters now. I mean, at the same time, yeah, they had a breakthrough season. But when you look at it, they finished 7-6, and they only had one win against a team with a winning record. Take a guess who that was, and they lost 31-9 in a bowl game to Buffalo, who was 7-5. I mean, that's not at the same. It's a really good season for Charlotte because they have such no offense, but they have such low standards because they're a young program. They haven't experienced success. But I mean, if that was Marshall, I mean, nobody would really be thinking that was that special. I mean, Marshall finished 8-5, which is better than 7-6, but people don't think it's that special. I mean, so at the end of the day, that's kind of what it comes down to. I think is that you got to once they start accomplishing stuff like big time levels of success, at least in Marshall fans' eyes. Which, like I said, we keep going back to the entitledness, and there's a little bit of that going on, and what they think Marshall should do and everything. But I mean, and the other thing is that fans see these young programs that don't have Marshall's history and tradition, and they just automatically label them as weaker. That's just kind of what it. Sometimes I think that's what fans do. They're just like, oh well, FAU doesn't have Marshall success, so they're not on Marshall's level. FIU doesn't. They're not on Marshall's level, and that's not always how it works. I mean, FAU and FIU, even though they're relatively young programs, they have some decided advantages over Marshall in several aspects. So I mean, a lot of that's just fan stuff, but I think if once those teams like start reaching major success, then that's when fans will stop labeling them as young and insignificant kind of thing. A lot of people think that a lot of these programs are insignificant just because they haven't accomplished much yet. But once you start getting to the UAB and FAU and even Western Kentucky, I mean, when they won back-to-back conference titles, they're still a pretty young FBS program, and that was just straight out of the gate in their Conference USA history for the most part. So once you start reaching that level, the way that fans look at you changes drastically, for sure.
Well, we only have a handful of programs in the conference that are legitimately young. Now, some of them may not have a lot of FBS experience, but really the only ones that are young are Charlotte and UTSA and Old Dominion. Everybody else has been around for a long, long time. I mean, hell, Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee have played, 90 some times. I mean, they're not babies, but yeah. So Aaron, what do they got to do? When will fans stop saying these teams are young in terms of history? What has to happen?
Well, you know what? In that question, I that was something that I didn't really have. My opinion is it's 2020. Nothing is slow anymore. Everything's expected right now.
Right.
They expect to be good right now, and some of them have. And I was more towards the not just the brand new programs, but the programs coming up, from the FBS or FCS level. Middle has been in championship games. UAB has been in championship games. Western's been in championship. I mean, it's time to realize that we're in a conference that is our conference, and all these teams are in equal footing to an extent. I mean, if you want to really break it down, teams don't win football games with tradition. You don't win football games because we've put our helmet on longer than another team. It has nothing to do with that anymore. It has to do with what you can show them, what you can build them, the budget, what you're paying your coaches, what you're paying everything. And, break it down, take a look at numbers. And right now it's time for Marshall fans to realize, holy crap, if we don't do something about this, they're going to pass us up, because it's on us now. We're going to be here a lot longer than Mike Hamrick is, Doc Holliday is, Tim Cramsey is. We're going to be here longer than them. It's our program. They're trying to take care of it for us while we're here, but it's our program to fix, our program to, if it's broke, our program to supply money to, and supply passion to, and to make that tradition ours. And I think, often I go back to something you said earlier about this passionate, rabid, hardcore group we had, and I have to go back to the end of this year, and it used to be right there in the middle of the east sideline sections, 109 to 1 or 107 to 111. There was your hardcore. That was your people that were there all the way to the top every game, sitting over there, pointing over at the chairbacks and making fun of the blue hairs for not coming. How many times did you read that? Trace, I have no idea how old you are. I don't know how long you've been around the message board world, but in the early 2000s, that's all it was. It was West Siders complaining about East Siders not coming or staying out in the parking lot. Now they're not here either. And, it's time for Marshall fans to take the program back and get rid of the coach is not the way to do it. It's supporting it and making it our own again. And otherwise, all these teams are they're not going to necessarily pass us up, but they're going to come up and hang out with us year in and year out.
Hard to argue. I gotta steer off just a second because something you just said sparked a question in my head, and I want to ask it of you both while I'm thinking about it, because we keep talking about not coming to the games or you should support the program or whatever, however you want to phrase it. So if you're one of those folks, or you have a group of folks that want to see some kind of change in the program, what's the right way to do it? Because you say, well, you should keep going, you should keep supporting. Okay, I could understand how some folks might say, well, that just feeds into the ideology that I'm okay with what's happening, but I want change. Well, if I don't go, then that's a bad look because that's not helping either. That just gives us less money to do with what I want done. So if I'm a guy who wants to see something change, what's the right way to tackle that, in your opinion? And I'll let you start with that, Aaron. What's the best way to tackle that?
I don't know the answer exactly, although I do know one thing. I'm not comparing Marshall University to Nebraska.
No, this is just completely theoretical.
Right, but how many coaches has Nebraska been through since Tom Osborne left?
Yeah.
More than they probably thought they would be. And how many games have they not sold out? I'll give you a hint. I think it rhymes with hero and it starts with a Z. And so clearly that's the way that, not showing up is not the way they attacked it. And if we want to be this program that's not FAU, FIU, Old Dominion, or whatever, and if we demand that we are this elite, not necessarily elite, but tradition-laden program that we claim to be, then that's the only way that it works. Go back to the basketball program. And Marshall fans were like, get rid of Ron Jersa and I'll come back. They didn't. Then it's, well, I'm going to wait and see who you hire. And then when they hire him, it's like, well, let me wait and see how they do for a year or so. It's time to go. I don't know what the answer is. I know that it doesn't start with people like me and you. It starts with the 2,500 or so freshmen that walk on the campus every August. That's where it starts. West Virginia, I hate to even say those words together, and Baylor, their goal when those guys are freshmen is to make them a fan that day. Make them a fan that day so that when they are living in North Carolina, when they're 38 with 2 kids and a mortgage, they're still going to pile in a car and drive to Mountaineer Field on a Saturday and watch the game. And that's what we have to do starting when they're freshmen. And it's time to stop looking up here at these people, and it's time to get back down to that level. And I think that's the only way that it's ever going to get back to where people are only going to be happy with. I'm happy with whatever. I get to go to a football game as many times a year as I want to go. And, and I hate to, it sounds cliche, and I don't mean any disrespect by it, but, 50 years ago, We weren't guaranteed that. I wasn't around then, but we weren't guaranteed that. Those guys weren't even guaranteed a game the next week. And, I just don't think that's appreciated anymore.
I can't argue with the fact about building a fan base with the students, because that is where it's born. If you go to school for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years and you don't ever care enough to walk across campus, you're definitely not going to climb in a car and drive 5 or 6 hours to a ball game.
Right.
It's not going to happen. But until Marshall is the hottest ticket in town, you're always going to have this problem.
Oh, yeah.
And I guess that's a long road to hoe. You've got to start making kids at 18, 19, and 20 want to have that ticket 5, 6, 7 years from now.
Right.
So, it's an excellent point. It's not one I thought of. I was thinking more of the alum fan who's in the situation you were talking about. I'm that guy that wants to see a change. What should I keep writing that check, or should I put a halt on the check for this year, and that'll show that I want something to change. That's what I meant by that. Okay, so Trace, you asked a good question here. So what improvements need to be made to push Marshall over the hump to win another championship? What improvements, I guess, based on what we saw this year, to get into a championship game next year? Let's go that route. Aaron, what do they got to do? What's going to get them over the hump from this year to next year?
Well, now we get to get into football talk, right?
Yeah.
It's like Trace said earlier. You win Conference USA championships with a first or second team, basically all Conference USA football player behind center, and Isaiah Green's going to have to play better. I think he knows that. I think the coaches know that. I think every player needs to play better, but I think it's going to start there, and it's going to start with that wide receiver crew. Luckily, we have several tight ends. Is clearly a important piece of Tim Cramsey's offense. We saw that this year. Geez, I think a few times there were 3 and 4 of them on the field at the same time, not bunched in between the hash marks, running for 2.5 yards, but spread out, doing all kinds of different things. The defensive, in defense, I felt that Doc has always talked about he needs his seniors to have their best year on campus. And I felt that the interior of our defensive line did not do that this year. I don't want to say I'm disappointed in Channing Hames. He was, he had his moments, but I thought that was the key to our defense going into this year was Channing Hames and whoever was lined up beside of him. And I don't think they made nearly as big an impact. Tavante Beckett is a very, very good linebacker, but he's not a big linebacker. And it doesn't matter how good he is. You can have a 320-pound, slow, bad left guard, and if he blocks Tavante Beckett, he's going to win because he's substantially bigger. And we had way too many, at times getting through. Even though we had a good rush defense, we gave up some plays in that Charlotte game. I think was, we saw poor old Beckett making plays, but they're 8, 9, 10 yards downfield. And I think it started in that interior. I think the biggest key to this year is Isaiah Green and whoever starts at 2 defensive tackle positions. We got to start creating our own breaks. I've said the bad luck that we've had. I hate it when a lot of people say that's excuses when they're actual facts. I mean, an excuse can be a fact at times, and I think that we have to start creating our own. But I still think that we've got a lot coming back. These people who think we're automatically, because Obi left or just because it's a new year, that we're going to go 4-8 or 5-7. This football schedule, sure, we're adding Pitt, in place of VMI. That's who we played this year, right? VMI, and Pitt in place of them. But ECU was 4-8 last year. Boise, we get them at home. Strange things happen here at home. We get Pitt at home. We go to Ohio. Ohio loses their quarterback. Yeah, we struggle up there, but that group of players are gone, that have struggled up there. We got a brand new group getting ready to head back up there. And then once we get in conference play, we get through those. The key is La Tech and Western. And the fact that we play them back-to-back and early in the season, I think is actually a stroke of good luck for Doc, because they're going to have newer quarterbacks. I think Western's probably going to have the one kid that maybe played a little bit this year or no.
We shall see.
We shall see. But, two new quarterbacks there. And, we don't play too bad on the road anymore. We play bad in Texas, but we're not playing in Texas. So I think those two games are crucial. So we're going to have an experienced quarterback going down there for a change. So I think that's the improvements, the areas that we need to improve in.
Yeah, I would say that's not to be lost. Is you also be breaking in a brand new center. So, Isaiah Green's going to have somebody brand new, that he's working with. So let's hope that chemistry.
But it should be Millette would be my guess. Who has been beside Levi for a whole bunch of games.
Yeah.
So, he's learned, and I don't think we'll see much of a drop off there. Hopefully he moves in, and I don't know who would move over to guard. It'd be nice if somebody like Tarek Adams would move into guard so we could have, Ball on the outside and have that group of five, who were 5 of our 6 guys this year start. So I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think whoever it is going to be surrounded by 4 guys who have started a lot of football games.
Oh yeah.
And they'll make sure he's all right. But but good point.
Yeah. All right, Trace, what's the improvements? This is your question. I know you got something cocked and loaded. So what is it?
Well, to just for one word, offense. I think the offense has to get better. I've been vocal enough about the offense and what I've thought of it over the last few years, and it's been pretty average. If you would just look since 2014, we always say since 2014. Since 2014, the offense is just, I don't know. 2015 had a pretty good offense, but that was with Chase Litton as a freshman, and they still had a lot of carryover from the 2014 team. But since then, offenses haven't even been close to top 50 in scoring offense since 2015. I looked it up the other day, and the scoring offense since 2014, the average scoring offense for Marshall since then is 74.6. So basically 74th or 75th in the country. That's below average. 130 teams, that's slightly below average. And then on the flip side of that, if you look what the defense has been doing since then, the defenses have been holding their own. The defenses for the most part, besides 2016, which you can just kind of throw that out as an anomaly for everything, but the scoring defense average since 2014 is 41.4. So that's 30 plus, places better than the offense in scoring defense since that time frame. If you can just get the offense closer to that 40 range, I feel like Marshall wins 1 or 2 titles in that time frame. I feel like it's just got to be there. The offenses can't be 20. That's what I said. 20 ho-hum 25 points a game. It's just not gonna. You're not gonna win. You're not gonna reach the ultimate goal if you're scoring 25 points a game. That's just kind of how I feel. The consistency of the offense hasn't been there. Some games they can do really well. Some games will put up almost 600 yards, like against Middle, but then they'll score 13 points. You just can't do that. And then the consistency issue with the whole team is that's a problem, because sometimes they have those bad losses. 2018, they lost to Middle at home. They lost to Southern Miss. That kept them out of the championship game. 2019, same deal. Charlotte, Middle Tennessee, we know this. They have those 1 or 2 losses that are just kind of inexplicable, and that keeps them out of the big game, and that's got to be fixed. But honestly though, the defense, of course, they could be better. Everything could be better always, but the defenses, in my opinion, have been more than enough to have Marshall at a championship level over the last few years. It's the offense, in my opinion, that has held them back, because a lot of that is this fact that they don't have Rakeem Cato anymore, and they have to find a guy they can trust back there. Litton showed flashes, and of course we never got to see what he could do as a senior. And then Isaiah Green showed flashes. It's just there needs to be more consistency at quarterback and with the offense in general. So in my opinion, if the offense this year could get around the 40 or in the 40s in scoring offense, that would be significantly better, and I feel like Marshall would win probably 2 or 3 more games at least than what they would have won normally.
You're talking about a national ranking, right? You're not talking about 40 points a game.
Okay.
Right?
No, national ranking.
Oh, I was like, whew, that's some lofty goals, man.
I wish we could take 40 a game.
You know what's funny though, Trace? We scored 25 points every conference game this year. We're 8-0.
Well,
Well, that's I'm only saying 25 because that's the number you were using. If we scored that in those 2 games, we win.
Yeah.
And we're 8-9.
but yeah.
Going into this year, is it my turn to talk yet?
Yeah, it's open
Okay,
now.
I wasn't sure. Okay. And all the preseason events, the big green, luncheons and the reverse raffles and the radio shows. You heard Doc and Coach Cramsey talk about, last year we won with defense. This year our offense is here. And one thing that I appreciate about those 2 guys this year is, wow, how quickly things changed with that. When you take 3 people off the field all at once, in Obi, Artie Henry, and Tyler King. Tyler King, I've heard coaches, Doc, talk about, he was a 1%er. There aren't too many people like that guy. And we removed him, and he completely mid-year had to change how we were going to win football games. And we did. And it was defense again this year. It wasn't supposed to be, but it was. And, next year lose a lot on defense, but return a little bit as well. So, but I agree. We do have to score more points. Obviously, more points this year, 25 points a game, and we're good. But it didn't happen. So, but I agree with you. That's definitely an improvement that has to be made.
Kind of crazy that 25 points a game would have landed you in a conference title game.
Well, that goes to the defense too. That's just kind of backs up what I said earlier. It's like the defenses over the last 5 seasons have held their own. They're putting the teams in situations where if you can just score 25 a game, then you win. If the defense was like it was in 2012, my God, you would have had to score 50 to win. It's crazy. So the defense, even with coordinator changes, that we've had 2 or 3 of those the last few years, they've still held their own for the most part. They dipped off a tad this year, but it was still a top 4 or 5 defense in a conference, and that's kind of what I thought it would be heading into the season. And defense was more than capable enough of putting them in a position to win a championship.
And that would be a lot of losses on defense as well.
I was going to say, how could you expect to not have a dip when you lose all 3 starting linebackers? You lost Ryan B. and Malik Gant.
Mm-hmm.
Good gracious.
And then once the year started, you lose Brandon Drayton, Derek
Drayton,
Gibbons, just go Jaquan Yulee, Jerome Maddox. All the way up the middle, you just lost player after player, and so
shows the depth they got.
Yeah, the defense has definitely got a lot of depth. I'm interested to see. We talked about this way back in the preseason position group breakdowns when we were talking about Herd football going into 2019 about this wide receiver core and how it was going to be unproven with the departure of Tyree Brady, and everything we thought was going to be predicated on Obialo and not far behind Artie Henry. And you don't have either of those guys for the majority of the season. And now it's the same old question going into 2020, who's going to be the guy? And of course, that's a question for another time. But you guys both seem to think that more offense is the question. And now, Brendan Knox is a known entity. Not everybody's got one of those guys, and everybody wants one. And luckily, Marshall's has one. But
can I make another little shameless plug here?
Sure.
All right. The next few weeks is going to be fun on some visitors, on some potential. There will be several potential transfer wide receivers here.
Oh, cool.
Well, that's a very good sign. I was kind of. I know the receivers were young for the most part. I know there was some just flat out bad luck with Obialo and Henry and guys out for most of the year. But like I said, it wasn't all on Isaiah Green. Some of his struggles this year weren't all on him. A lot of that was just the fact the receivers weren't creating separation, weren't getting open. A lot of freshmen, a lot of sophomore back there. You see potential in guys like Brock Thompson and Corey Gamage and guys like that. But they're at the end of the day, you got to remember they're freshmen. And very few freshman receivers at Marshall outside of maybe Randy Moss or Darius Watts or whoever you want to look at. Most guys don't step up that much as a freshman. So they kind of have to develop.
Yeah. Right. Yep. All right. Yeah. If nobody has been perked up until the hour and 18-minute mark, as soon as you said pay attention to recruiting, I'm sure a lot of ears just shot straight up and down there because it seems to be our followers love that recruiting news. I know
Yeah,
that. Don't we all?
That's about the only information that that social media members are allowed to break. Once they get on campus, we don't talk to them unless it's set up by the SID and like the rest of the media does. So that's why it's so much fun these weekends leading up. We get to tell people who's coming, get to go to the basketball games. They get to see them there, figure out who's who. Are they wearing something Marshall? Do they look interested? Are they on their phone the whole time?
Yeah.
It's a long off season. I don't know about you, but I'm waiting for football. So anything I can get, I take.
Yeah, we try to fill our, time between the end of the football season and the summer when we start the 2020 season on the show here. It's, transfers, a coaching carousel. It's like anything we can get a hold of that keeps that motivation for football news going because, look, I like basketball and it's well documented, but I just cannot get into it like a lot of folks do. And I'm a football guy. I can't help it,
And I see your hat there. The only thing I ask of the people on your hat right now is to get me to August 1st. That's it. That's all I ask. And they can't even do that.
Reds fan, man, being a Reds fan is like being a Browns fan. It's just, it's mostly heartache, but what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I live right outside Tampa now, and I will not be a Rays fan. It's not happening. I'm not going to be a Bucks fan. Not happening. I have a lot of disdain for the Bucks from way back before this last realignment of the NFL because I'm a Packers fan, and the Bucks used to be in the NFC Central, man. So Warren Sapp and Favre used to go at it big time, and here I live in a pro sports town, and I can't cheer for any of the teams.
Well, they got Byron though. That might help you.
Yeah, but I'm not going to cheer. I'm not like, go Bucks. I'm like, all right, put up 600 yards, but lose.
Yeah.
They seem to be doing that quite a bit.
That's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, I know. All right, so here we got a couple of final questions here. If we feel like it, if you guys feel like it, we'll dabble into some of these questions that were tweeted to you. But I'm interested in this one as well. We're going off of football a little bit, but it's focused on Doc Holliday. And this is a really interesting question because I think this would have changed a lot of opinions way back when. And this is the final question that you alluded to at the beginning of the show, Aaron. This is, did Doc Holliday, I'm assuming you're talking about from a fan standpoint, did Doc ever get a fair shake at Marshall from the fans? And what opinions of him would be, or what would opinions of him be now if a couple of things had gone in Marshall's favor against West Virginia University way back in 2010? So if you could digest that whole question, Trace, if you got that and understood it the way I read it, what do you say to that? How do you think the opinion of Doc would be? Let's just say if he'd have gotten that win way back in 2010.
If he'd gotten that win, he wouldn't have to win another game at Marshall. Just straight up. Like, it didn't matter what. He could have had a 1-75 record. People would be happy with it. That's what it comes down to. If he would have won that game, he would be considered an immediate at the time and forever a success. That's just the way I see it. That would have done it right there. Now, as far as has he gotten a fair shake or did he get a fair shake from the fans? I think yes and no to that. I think, if you're being objective and being like realistic about it, I think he got a fair shake. But if you're one of those people who are like, oh, well, he's a Mountaineer, I don't want a Mountaineer as a head coach, I feel like those people really never quite gave him enough of a chance. But my God, if they would have won that WVU game, first of all, that would have changed the whole 2010 season. They would have been at least in a bowl game, which could have been a much better start than what they started at 5-7. But I think that could have completely changed the whole fortune of the program. To be honest with you, they could have. They reached a high level, obviously, a few years later. But I feel like that could have changed the whole fortune of the program. I feel like, that was his second game as the head coach. That was his first home game as the head coach. And I know I've made this comparison before. It kind of reminds me of Mark Schneider's second game as the head coach. Kansas State, home game, biggest crowd in the history of the Joan up to that point. They have everything lined up to win the game. They lose 21-19 when they had at least that I know of 2 turnovers inside their opponent's 10-yard line. and they lost by 2 points, and then had a chance at the end, kick the field goal, and then the interception happened, they audible, whatever. I mean, if Snyder would have got that win right there against at the time, perennial Big 12 contender, I mean, maybe not that season, but before that they were. If he would have got that win, that would have completely probably changed the whole rest of his tenure. And I can guarantee you, if Marshall would have beat West Virginia in 2010, that would not only be the biggest signature win probably in Marshall history, but it would also have completely made Doc a long time, forever success story in the eyes of the fans. But unfortunately, it just didn't quite work out. Vinny Curry was held in the end zone. I'm not blaming that for the loss. I mean, you're up 21-6 midway through the fourth quarter, and you have it first and goal. You got to put that game away. I mean, I don't know how many times over the years I've said, what if they just don't get any yards there and then they kick a field goal and go up 3 scores? The game's over. Like the game is over. They would not have had enough time to come back and tie the game. I mean, look what they scored the game winning or the game tying 2-point conversion with just a few seconds left. They would not have had enough time to score 3 times. Ugh. So
let me ask you a question. How old were you in 2010?
Me?
Yeah.
16.
Still holding that contempt, man. Still holding that contempt.
I'm still holding a contempt from Kansas State. I still bring that game up. Like, I still bring it up.
Oh my goodness. Well, obviously, you must think that maybe he hasn't gotten a fair shake. So expound on your feelings of that question, Aaron.
I think it started with that game. We heard so many, Trace, you just mentioned at least 3, maybe 4 things that had they happened, we win.
Yeah.
Period. And they weren't hard things at all. Even if we ran the ball 3 times and missed that field goal,
yep,
they weren't going to have enough time. If we make the field goal, it's over. Holding in the end zone, it's over. And he actually got held twice on the same play because of how long he scrambled. Yeah. And then, the fumble, which I'll never put that game on Tron Martinez because that guy basically bore his heart and soul and legs for that program as long as he was here, and to get us, to be better. And but so many things that could have happened then, and they were on him right after the game. It was Don Nealon. He was conservative. He punted from the 38-yard line. He did this. He did that. He did that. It was the first game, and it was done. And I want to tell you right now, and this is kind of the question that I was kind of waiting on, not for the sake of he didn't get a fair shot, but just to kind of parlay that into what we have as our head coach. And, that was, you were 16, and I'm not knocking your age at all. But that following Tuesday or Thursday, we were all sitting at the quarterback club lunch that week. And he got up there, and this is the day that I knew he was not a Mountaineer. He was a Marshall guy from that point. He stood up there, and for the first probably 30 seconds, couldn't even get a word out. His voice would not form a word. And then the first words out of his mouth were, "I'm sorry." And from that point on, I was sold. I don't care. All I want is somebody that's going to do their best and love what I love. And that's what he is. And when people can't see that, and then, I grew up a big Chuck Landon fan. I read him every week. I loved when he made his high school predictions. And when he kind of made a little backhanded remark at Doc's emotion at that he showed at I don't remember if it was one of the year-end events or if it was at one of the fountain ceremonies, and basically questioned the validity of that. That was uncalled for. And that just goes to show where this fan base has been split by a couple individuals. No need to go into one of the current ones that I think, since he's still here, but one of them who used to be here. And it's a shame, and the guy doesn't deserve it. There's not a person out there that loves this place more than he does. The things he does for our school, our program, and the kids. I got a story from a walk-on not even a guy who was going to be a scholarship player, a walk-on, had a life that none of us could ever possibly fathom growing up. And he's not from Florida, because I know that's another whole thing. And recently had a talk with Doc, and Doc said, you know what, get your physical and let's start working out. You know, he was here trying to, you know, he made great grades, and he still wasn't able to get a point to try out. And you know what, he's going to be there, and he's going to, you guys probably never hear his name. I'm not even going to go into his name, but we'll never hear it probably. But the types of stuff that he does behind the scenes, the type of program that we have that is so accessible and so lovable. You know, my brother-in-law is a huge Alabama fan, has been his whole life. He's been to like 4 games. You can't go to the games. You can't see the coach. You can drive down here on 3rd Avenue tomorrow, walk in the Shuey building, and if Doc's there and you want to say hi to him, you can probably walk in and say hi to him. And I think it's just a lot of the little things that we have as a fan base, and he provides it for us. And, you know, I don't think he's been given a fair shot from the day he was here. I think that game just magnified it. And for me, it was exact opposite. From that point on, I was his biggest supporter. That was a little off topic there. Sorry.
No, that's actually very, you know, I like hearing this kind of stuff, you know, it all plays into the whole fan experience. I mean, you know, some people have contempt, and they, like we talked about in the episode past, they don't even remember why they're mad. They just remember that they're mad, and they're just going to continue to be mad. You know, they're like long forgotten why. But I want to, before you say something, I want to talk about what I remember most from that West Virginia game. I remember watching it, and I remember you talked about him punting from the 38 or whatever it was, and I remember that was a 4th and 1, and I remember thinking, Marshall's got a 6'6", like 250-pound tight end, Lee Smith, who's currently still in the NFL, and I'm thinking, you could grab that dude by the face mask and say, go get me a freaking yard, and put that ball in his gut, and he could fall for 3 feet, you know? And I thought, man, I can't believe they're not going to at least try that. Just one first down seals it away. That's what I remember most about that game. Whether that would be the right call or the wrong call, I don't know. Because ultimately West Virginia goes down, scores a touchdown anyway, so who cares? But I remember thinking, man, I think I would have given it to the biggest, probably toughest dude to bring down and say, try to get me a yard. But hey, we can all be Monday morning quarterbacks and play coulda, shoulda, woulda. But that's what I remember most. What were you going to say, Trace?
Yeah, about that game a little bit more. I mean, it wasn't just one thing that lost in that game. I mean, it was a multitude of things. I mean, the fumble inside of the 5. I mean, the only thing with that is, for me, it's not as much about, you know, Tron Martinez. It's more about maybe in that situation that I might have played, which, I mean, I'm trying to think back of the running back situation at that point, but maybe I would have played a little more veteran guy in that situation. I don't know. I mean, Martinez had a good game. I mean, that first drive of the game when Marshall went up 7-0, I mean, he had a big long run. I don't know, it was like 40 some yards or something. And I mean, he showed he had a good game, but maybe in that situation, I might have gave it to Martin Ward. I mean, the 09 Little Caesars Bowl MVP, no less, you know, but I mean, maybe that, and then of course people were like, "Whoa, Tyler Warner should have made the field goal." I don't blame Tyler Warner 1 second for missing that field goal.
We weren't winning the game. We weren't.
No. Once it got to overtime, you knew it was over. It was done. It was done. And then of course everybody's look at the Chris Rippon, you know, prevent defense thing, the 10-yard cushion thing. I mean that didn't lose them the game.
Every coach does that every weekend.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it didn't help them per se, but it didn't cost them the game. It's just a multitude of things. And then looking at Doc a little bit more, I mean, Doc, you know, Doc's a Hurricane guy. I've lived in Hurricane my entire life, and you know, I've met Doc a couple times. He's a great guy. I mean, he's really just kind of just an old fashioned soul, kind of just an old soul, when like he's got a lot of passion and, you know, love for the game and everything. And it's not, I think the thing with people criticizing him, and obviously I don't think it's about him as a person. I think it's just him about, you know, results, and like, you know, they want more and more and more. And I mean, for right or for wrong, that's what fans want. It's not about him as a person. Nobody's questioning him, you know, as a, you know, husband, father, or you know, whatever. I mean, nobody's looking at it like that. It's more just, all right, we got to see more We got to see some championships. Beating a dead horse. We got to see championships. I mean, one title in 10 years. You know, we've heard that for however long, and that's what it's about. It's about wins. That's what the criticism. That's where it comes from. Wins and losses, big wins, championships. That's what it comes down to. I mean, I think he's a great dude. Honestly, you know, I want to see him have as much success as possible, but some people disagree whether or not he's the guy to lead the program into the 2020s. So I don't know.
No, time will tell. Running out of time if there's not an extension. I know that.
Yeah.
The clock is indeed ticking, and we've mentioned that many times on the podcast. Marshall's got to make a decision. They've got to do something. You can't go in and expect to play the 2020 season and make no announcement one way or the other and expect things to be okay. Like, people have to know what's going to go on moving forward. So
I don't think you're going to.
yeah, and
No, I think he'll go into it without one, and you know, and maybe now, at this point, this late in the recruiting game, maybe that's the only way to motivate the fan base next year is for him to go into the season without one. I think if he should have gotten one 3, 4, 5 months ago. I think at this point in time, you've already bit the bullet, losing some recruiting battles potentially already in the early signing period. So now it's just let him be him and be, as we go back to a typical West Virginian fighting an uphill battle, back against the wall and come out and, you know, he gets to show us what he's made of. And I think we're all going to be, me especially, going to be very happy come November.
My gut just tells me that Doc's contract will at least coincide with Isaiah Green's last 2 years of eligibility. That just feels at a minimum of what it would be. It's like Green graduates, maybe then Doc is hanging him up or whatever. I don't think they leave it on the hook with Green being a senior and Doc being gone. I just don't.
I know if I'm Doc Holliday and I've coached football as long as I've coached football, and I'm here, I'm doing everything I can to coach the 2022 season and being able to walk out on that field at Notre Dame as the head coach of a football team.
Oh, yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
I mean, how can you not want to do that?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that didn't even think about that. That kind of stuff does not enter into my thought process. It's too far out. So that leads into the final question that you guys submitted, and that's good. We're talking about Doc and an extension. So leads right into that. Trace, you asked, how can attendance and fan support / morale improve? So, Aaron, how can that improve?
Well, I don't know that at this point in time it can. There's, again, you know, for the first time maybe in Doc's career, he's going to get a little bit of luck. You know, he's going to get to come out and have a chance to beat Pitt and Boise State right out of the gate. Try to exercise some demons and get a win up in Athens and beat ECU. And set up, those 4 games are set up to where you come out of that 3-1 or 4-0, even 2-2 to an extent. Not too many people are going to be able to find too many things bad to say at that point. And then you jump right into conference play and then take those 2 road games that we talked about, get through those, and then I think it's got to be there. Other than that, I think people right now are, you know, that's something that I actually don't have an answer for. I think it's time. The only way is to come back to what I said earlier about it's time for the fans to take ownership of their program again, and take ownership of their tradition that they're proud of, and that they've let wane big time late last season. It's time for them to be fans. I mean, why not? What else? I mean, people say, well, I want to spend my money doing something else. Okay, well, fine, but why? Did you stop liking Marshall and stop liking football all at the same time? I mean, you still have those 2 things going for you. I love going to football games. I love, football. I love Marshall, and I love hanging out with my friends. And you get all 3 of them, friends and family. You get all 4 of them at the same time. And it's something that I can't fathom. I can't fathom why people wouldn't go into the season excited.
Yeah. Trace? What do you got to do? What to get more butts in seats, to get more cars in the lots, to get everybody happy about the program again? What do you got to do?
Well, I want to start with something I like the point Aaron brought up earlier about Nebraska. Now, a lot of that, in my opinion, I was thinking when he was talking about that, Group of Five fan bases are they're just kind of borderline. All of them pretty much are. Like they all need something big to happen. They all need a top 25 ranking or a big win or a championship or a this or that. Teams like Nebraska and certain Power 5 teams, they could go out there and beat 0-12 every year, and they'd still have 90,000 people in the stands. I think that's just a difference between the Power 5 elite fan bases and then the Group of Five. I mean, the fact is, I've said it for a long time. Group of Five fan bases are big game hunters. That's what they are. If you look at Marshall's all-time top attendances, they're all against Power 5 marquee opponents. There's no coincidence there. I mean, but that's one thing that they have in their favor this year is you have Boise State and Pittsburgh home in 2 weeks apart, back-to-back home games. I mean, in my opinion, I don't think, at least in the Jones C. Edwards Stadium history, I don't think there's been two bigger consecutive home games at Marshall. I mean, that is Boise State. That is, in my opinion, the Alabama of a Group of Five over the last 2 decades. And then that's Pittsburgh, who has a big, long, rich history. I mean, they're an ACC team. I mean, that's really big games. So, like, big games, big home games are a way to bring everybody together, even if you don't necessarily agree with the program and where it's going and so forth. If you have a big game against a marquee opponent, I mean, just think, like 2016, Marshall was horrible, but like completely sold out the Louisville game. I mean, of course, it helps having Lamar Jackson come to town, and it helps that Louisville sent probably 5,000+ people. But I mean, every big game like that, it brings the fan base together. And that was the point I wrote down for that, is I think that there needs to be things that all the fans can rally around. It needs to be things that bring the whole fan base together. And one of the things I wrote down for that is something pretty prominent on social media right now is this college game day petition. It doesn't matter what is going on. If you agree with the offensive play calling, if you agree with Doc, if whatever you think about the program, I can tell you right now, every single Marshall fan wants that college game day to come for the 50th anniversary. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what else is going on. They could disagree with everything else involving Marshall football, but you would be hard pressed to find a fan that would not want that to happen. And it shows with 11,000 signatures in 2 weeks. I mean, it's just taken off huge. I mean, if you can find things like that, a game day petition or big home games or whatever the case may be, if you can find, I think that would go a long way in boosting morale and fan support. I think you just need more things to for everybody to be on common ground with. I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Look, I'm going to chime in on this one because it's our final question that you guys submitted, and I've got a few ideas that are kind of not related to winning games or marquee opponents or things like that. And you talked about a little bit ago a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff that we, as the casual fan, doesn't get to see. And I think that is a big thing in this day and age of social media that we have, that Marshall has the potential to put out there for people to see and have an ability to have a sense of closeness, more closeness to the program, and show a little bit of that behind the scenes stuff, a little bit of more of that in the weight room kind of stuff, or the goofing off at practice or whatever. So you can see the personality of these teams and you can start to relate a little bit more to these guys, because you see that with other programs. You can see that their social media departments or whatever are putting out these, not just game day hype videos. They're putting out little snippets from practice or this, that, and the other. And I just think we live in a day and age now where people want to consume stuff like that. They want to see the stuff that they otherwise wouldn't be able to see unless they were on the roster, And I know I enjoy watching stuff like that when I get to see it, when Western puts something out or when Marshall does put something out. I like seeing that kind of stuff, and it does give me a sense that I'm a little bit closer to the program. Like I know these guys on a little bit more of a personal level. So I think if something like that were to happen a little bit more often, that morale amongst the fan base, probably at least the younger fans, like we talked about, needing to build a future fan base, would definitely improve. And of course, the easy answer is you got to start winning championships, winning more games. Like, and even though ultimately it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, if you start winning in a sexy fashion, then that just grabs attention, and people want to see that. They want to watch that. I mean, you sat in the stands in the late 90s and the mid 90s and watched Marshall obliterate people and loved every second of it, I'm sure, and you guys did it in 2014. Marshall just ran roughshod through Conference USA, and it was fun to watch. You wouldn't have missed a game unless your life depended on it, and granted, a win's a win. But if you can do it in a really sexy fashion, that's just going to make people that otherwise might stay at home come in. So outside of doing that, I think some more fun on social media with these younger fans is what you're going to have to quickly improve morale and maybe a little bit of fan support too.
Well, I was going to say one thing real quick. I know I can tell you one way that would immediately boost some morale is if Marshall could go out there and beat Pitt or Boise State. Or dare I say both? If they could do that, that would be, that's another thing fans talk about is the lack of, signature wins, quote unquote signature wins. If Marshall could go out there and beat Boise State or Pitt, that would absolutely raise a lot of morale. And just like that's what I said for the bowl game against UCF, if they could have pulled that off, that would have been a huge win for the program, because that would have been, fans would have been like, okay, well maybe Doc's got something here. Maybe, they're going to start looking like they did a few years ago, so if they could, that would be big. I mean, both of those games are going to be big crowds. I don't know. It's hard to tell what they'll be, but like if they could go out there in front of maybe a sellout crowd or two and beat one of those teams, that would be big time for the program, big time for Doc, his perception with the fans and everything. That would boost morale right there.
I've got a stinking feeling that this Boise State game has the potential to dethrone that Purdue atmosphere as the most electric that you've seen at Jones C. Edwards Stadium in a while, because I doubt many Boise fans will make the trip across country. Yeah. So that is an opportunity for Marshall fans to fill the stadium and be all Kelly green and white and be loud and have an opportunity to beat a probably preseason top 25 team. Mm-hmm. So I think that'll be a lot of fun.
And Marshall fans are going to have they're going to have to man up that day.
Yeah, they should. They should gut check it and, be like, dude, I'm going to buy a ticket and go. I don't want to go, but I'm going, Because what if you go and win? You're going to say, well, I was going to go, but I sat at home.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Hey, no, man, you're going to want to say I was there.
You want big time football. Everybody wants big time football. They want these big marquee home games. Well, they got them. You got to prove it. You got to go.
If Hamrick's going to schedule them and you're going to get them, you've got to go. You can't say I'm going to stay at home watching on TV.
Well, but that kind of goes with the team too. I mean, the Cincinnati game this last year, there was a pretty good, pretty big crowd. I don't remember what it was, 32,000 or whatever it was. I mean, that's a pretty solid crowd. But I mean, of course, the team just didn't really have much of a chance. So it's like the team has to perform against those big teams as well. But it starts with the fans. I mean, you can't guarantee how your team's going to play, but you should be able to guarantee how many people show up for a big home game.
Well, you can also not urge, but you can dictate the energy level within the stadium. Yep. So you can most definitely help performance on the field. Yep. I mean, if you're loud when the other team has the ball and you're quiet when your team has the ball, you can't tell me that doesn't have a factor in how well you play defense or how well you play offense.
Yep.
It gets back to where you were talking about Nebraska a while ago. And Nebraska's definitely, some of those schools are in a different stratosphere. But if we want to be tradition-wise the Nebraska of the G5 level, then we gotta come to games no matter what. No matter whether we're happy or not, it's those people do it. Why don't we? Chad Pennington told us, why not us and why not now? Well, it's time for the fans to look at themselves like that as well.
Yeah, I feel like that in a lot of aspects of life. Everybody likes to play wait and see, and then you can kind of hop on when things are already going in the right direction. It's easy to do that. But I've always been of the school of thought, like, man, I'll sit through the excruciating losses because it makes the wins that much better. Mm-hmm. I hate sitting in the rain and cold and getting blown out by 30, but when you're on the other side of that coin, it just seems a heck of a lot sweeter. Yeah.
I remember I standing there at the end of that when UCF beat us to break their winless streak down at the Citrus Bowl. I stood there till the bitter end and watched them carry that goalpost off. And
you think, man, I don't ever want to experience that again.
Right.
But I'll do it if it happens.
Yeah, I'll do it if it happens. Yeah.
All right. Well, look, I'm going to give you one of these, and then we're going to get the heck out of here because it's getting a little late. So we're going to use the one. This is kind of interesting. I don't know who this came from, but this is the first one that came through of the two. So after 2 years with Tim Cramsey, is it obvious that Doc Holliday is too involved in that offense? Do you think he's got his hands in it? Do you get the feeling that Cramsey would just like to cut it loose and be more of a risk taker? I'm not muting any mics. You guys just go at it. I don't care.
Well, I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that because, quite frankly, I don't know how involved Doc is with the offense. I mean, I don't know.
Does it feel like it? That's what I'm saying. Does it feel like it?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like he's any more or less involved than when they were putting up 45 points a game with Cato. I mean, I think it more is just a personnel thing more than anything else. I mean, yeah, could they open up the playbook more and could they get more creative, like maybe Jeff Brom or I'm trying to think of somebody else, whoever, offensive minds. Could they do more of that? Yeah. And do I want to see them do more of that? Yeah. But at the same time, you can't run a trick play every play. I mean, you can't, you can get creative with some formations and schematic stuff. You can do all that, which Cramsey's introduced some of that stuff. But I mean, from what I've heard about Cramsey from his previous destination in the FCS, from what I've heard, I don't really think he's running a whole lot different offense now than he did there. So I feel like I mean, obviously the FCS is different, but I mean, he had the horses to run it. I mean, I feel like now it's like, yeah, you got some players offensively. Brendan Knox is a superstar, and you got some pieces there, but I mean, you got an inconsistent quarterback. So, I mean, Cato wasn't inconsistent. I mean, he was putting up 45 touchdowns, 40 touchdowns, 35 touchdowns, 4,000 yards. If you can have a quarterback like that, he's going to make it can be the most basic middle school or high school offense, and he's going to make it look exceptional. And I think a lot of that's the case. I mean, is Doc too involved with the offense? I'm not sure because I don't know how involved he is with it. But, I mean, maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But either way, I mean, the offense, like I said, I mean, I just keep beating the dead horse again. I mean, offense has to improve to win a championship and to get to the level that they expect to be at.
I think this question lends itself to a little bit of what you asked before about getting the fair shake. And I think a lot of fans see that what they perceive as run, pass, punt, or pass, run, punt, and they immediately think Doc Holliday, Don Nehlen, boring offense. So do you think that the offense is being held back at the hands of Doc Holliday, or is that just perception, Aaron?
Yeah, I still think it's perception. I don't think Doc is involved in downs 1 through 3. Maybe he's more the decision maker at the end of each set of downs. What we're going to do. Are we going to punt here? Are we going to go for it? I think Doc has. Is probably the type maybe that I gave you 3 chances to get 10 yards. You didn't do it, so sorry. But I don't know that he has much to do with each play that's called. There was some funky stuff going on out there on that field a lot. I mean, we pitched the ball around. We had people running, in motion behind the quarterback, in front of the quarterback, more so than ever. We had tight ends all over the place. We had running backs split out. Before Tyler King was, let go, that guy was lined up all over the field in practices. I mean, he was split as far out as you can go and still be in bounds. The types of plays we were running with him was, that was a big, and I know it was just one season that I'm talking about here, and we're, you guys are looking more at 10 years when it comes to his tenure and whether he stays. But there was some bad luck this year. I mean, we lost a lot of talent and still found a way to be playing for a championship in essence at the end of the year. And I don't think that I think he adapts a lot better than what people give him credit for with what he has and the way a game's going. I think his goal is to have a shot to win in the fourth quarter, whether that means that we're up 28 or we're down 6 with the ball. I think that's his goal. And more often than not, like we said earlier, it works. And he, I don't think he has as big a part in the offense. This is if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong, I think Cramsey's past offenses ran the ball 58 to like 60-ish% of the time at his previous stop. So, I don't. And you watch any football game, he gets criticized for being involved on a 3rd and 18 running play. I mean, find me watch 100 football games opening weekend and find me 4 coaches that don't run the ball on 3rd and 18. I mean, whether it works or not, usually doesn't. That's just what they do, and they're so ingrained into their heads. And but I don't think so. But again, I'm not in the booth.
Yeah, me neither. I feel like that's just a scapegoat answer that a fan wants to say.
Right.
Like, well, this is obvious. Tim Cramsey came from Sam Houston State, where they were putting up, 700 yards a game every game, and they put up big numbers, that's for sure. And he was only there for 1 year. So the year before, their offensive coordinator got hired by Ole Miss, and they were putting up numbers like that too.
Yeah.
And he came in, and they didn't have any drop off. So I think that's the correlation. They thought, well, they were doing it here, they should do it here. We've got just as many weapons in Huntington as they did at Sam Houston State. So why isn't it a plug and play 7,000 yard offense?
Right.
Because football really doesn't work that way. That's why.
Exactly.
But I said
and I love Tim Cramsey.
Yeah.
I think he's if Doc ever leaves, I'd love to see Tim Cramsey be our head coach. I think he's got that persona, the way he is around here locally and with people in general, especially in our neck of the woods, so to speak. I think he would slide right in and be a perfect fit someday. But
I don't think there's a lot of fans, at least in our circle, that would disagree with that. I think Trace is – I can't speak for him. He can speak for himself. He's right here. But I don't think he's too displeased with Cramsey. I'm sure he'd like to see more yards and points. But overall, wouldn't we all? Wouldn't everybody like to see more yards and points?
Well, I think the bottom line for me is if like I said, it's personnel. It's a personnel thing. If you had Rakeem Cato in the offense the last few years, they would look just like they did in 2013 and 14. That's just, or 2012. Whatever year you want to look at it, I think they look just the same, because I think Cato would obviously make the receivers better. He would open up the running game. I mean, look what he did with his ability to throw the ball. Look what it did for Devin Johnson in 2014. I mean, just a monster year. Now, I mean, this isn't intended to be disrespect towards Isaiah Green, but he's not Rakeem Cato. So, I mean, if you have a drop-off, which it is, then the offense just isn't as good. I mean, I don't think it's as much about the play calling. Now, do I agree with all of it? Absolutely not. But I don't think any fan agrees with every play call that happens. I mean, I know I don't, but I mean, I know I get aggravated with certain things and certain conservative styles and stuff. But I mean, I feel like, honestly, it's more just about the personnel than it is anything else.
Yeah. One thing I like about Doc is he's been consistent for 10 years. He's going to, not saying he's predictable, and what's coming, but you probably know, in a situation what he's going to do, and he's going to let his players, execute the play. I think he's as big a players coach as there is, and I think he relies on them, and never heard him throw a player under the bus on a radio interview or TV interview. And I don't want to be to bring up another topic and be anti-basketball, because I'm not, and I love Dan D'Antoni. But, last week he can't say the same about not throwing players under the bus, because he did on a post-game radio show. And, I find that I'm going off on a tangent. I'll stop. Sorry.
I think all that. I don't know exactly where you were headed unless I heard that, but I think that's some of the things that people seem to adore about Dan D'Antoni, is that he's so open and candid, and he'll just let it fly, whatever's on his mind. And Doc is a little bit more guarded and deliberate, and you're not going to get that off the cuff comment. Trace loves to make fun of Doc a little bit when they're playing on the road, because he uses that Doc Holliday
toughness
quote.
And leadership.
See, every time you got to bring your toughness and leadership. You're going to get that quote every away game press conference, and he knows that. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know the answer. I really don't know the answer to that, but
I think that's a good point right there about D'Antoni and Doc differences and stuff. it's like I feel like the D'Antoni way is honestly more mainstream with coaches now. I mean, look at coaches like Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin and guys like that that are completely outspoken and like you could look at them as goons almost, but like they're so entertaining and they're so like likable as far as just like they'll say what like Mike Leach will just start talking about aliens out of nowhere. Like I mean. It's just a different, and it's just a difference in personalities, and I think that's a big difference why people like Dan D'Antoni over Doc is just D'Antoni's an open book, and he's not afraid to just say whatever he's thinking, and he's more kind of, I don't know if personable is the right word, but he's just more, he's more charismatic.
Yeah.
Then those people should say that what you just said, instead of wins and exciting style of play.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Because let's face it, we're a different basketball team this year. Dan D'Antoni's done a very good job of realizing I can't score 100 points this year. I have to come up with a different approach. And he's done a great job of that. Just like Doc this year went in expecting to be an offensive juggernaut, wasn't, adjusted, and still had a very successful season. There's a lot of hypocrisy.
Yeah, there is, but I'll tell you what, I do hear a fair amount of grumbling and whining and crying about the basketball team this year too. And Trace has he's had to come in several times and say, you're replacing all-time great players that were on the same team. And it's the same thing. There are several like all-timers that departed from the Marshall football team from last year. I mean, all-time great players that at certain positions that are gone, and you had to replace those guys. But Doc doesn't necessarily get the same benefit as D'Antoni does. He's not allowed to say he's rebuilding, because Marshall football, he's been here for 10 years. It should be built in a lot of folks' opinion.
And you know what? It is built. If we were rebuilding, we would be 1-11,
right.
Ripping it down and building it back up again. And he has built it to a point to where you said earlier, Trace, that he's got it to a point to where the floor should be 8-4.
Yeah.
To me, you need to pat somebody on the back for doing a good enough job, great enough job potentially, to get your program to a point to where 8-4 is the floor. I think if you're going to rip him, not you necessarily, if you're going to rip him for only being 8-4 or not winning a championship, you got to give him props for building the program to a point to where you expect more. Because he's the one that got it there to where you should expect more.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah. I think there's a big difference, too, going on. I think you said it before, too, Aaron. I think you've mentioned it. Like, there's starting to be, like, a difference or, like, a difference of basketball fans and football fans. There's starting to be more of that. And, I mean, a lot of that is, like we said, the difference in personalities between the head coaches. And a lot of that is the styles of play. A lot of that's, recency. I mean, basketball's had more recent major success than football has. I mean, 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, the NCAA tournament and all that stuff. But I mean, that's what I can't quite figure out too, is that just say, for example, this last weekend, the Old Dominion basketball game, there was like 6,400 people at that game. Like, and Marshall was 8-10 heading into that game. I mean, it seems like basketball now is the fans are starting to show up pretty consistently. You can pretty much count on 5,500, 6,500 or more fans. But it's like football, for some reason, it's just not. You almost can't even say they're going to get 20,000 seats anymore. So it's like, I don't know. There's definitely seems like there's a growing difference between the two programs and the fan bases. I mean, there obviously everybody should just be on the same page as far as support goes. But like, I don't know. It's just something's weird about that to me.
Yeah, agree.
I don't know what it is. I don't think anybody knows what it is. People are bored. It just feels like people are bored, and they're like, "Man, I'm not coming back until we are winning titles again." And I'm like you. I've never understood that. Like, why do you just want to be there when you're only winning?
All right.
Yeah.
Like, just go, man. Like, what else are you doing in Huntington, West Virginia on a Saturday in the fall?
And that's the thing. Some of the most fun wins I've been a part of, 2011 or 12? When we beat ECU in overtime,
11, yeah,
to go 6-6 and make a bowl.
Yeah.
That was awesome.
It's a phenomenal game.
That was so much, and that was even better than some of the wins we've had when we were 12-0 or 11-0. go back to the 90s. Yeah, it was fun, but still there was a different kind of stress. At that point, winning 28-7 wasn't good enough. You had to hope you won. You had to hope you covered the spread. You had to hope you did enough to get more votes, and you had to hope Pennington or Leftwich threw for enough yards so they're still in the Heisman talk. You couldn't just enjoy a 12-11 win over Kent. As a fan, that's all I want. I want to be excited. I don't, and to me, just I don't know.
It gets frustrating, doesn't it?
I just can't wait till the ECU game.
It gets frustrating because there are so many folks that aren't as just jazzed and enthused as most of us that do these shows, are. Like their fandom is a little bit thinner. I don't care. You can be the type of fan you want to be. I don't care. You spend your money how you want to spend it. You go to the game, don't go to the game, whatever. But I'm like you. I can't figure it out. If I had the opportunity to go see the Herd or the Tops play every weekend, I'd go. But I don't. I don't have that opportunity. I'm not going to be a South Florida fan. It ain't happening. Forget it. Forget it. But we got to get out of here, man. It is like 12:30, almost 12:40. Whew. Good thing I'm off tomorrow. Hate that for you guys. But look, thank you once again, Aaron, for coming on the show. Anytime you want to come back, just drop us a DM. You're welcome on the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Anytime. If you got anything you want to plug or talk about, you got a few minutes. I don't care. Say what you want to say. If you want to go home, get out of here. That's fine too. But we really do appreciate you coming on. I hope you had a lot of fun, and we'll do it again anytime you feel like it.
I had a blast. Thanks for having me. Anytime you can talk for 2 hours and 3 minutes and 9 seconds on a running clock about Marshall sports and football, I don't care if you're against me or with me. It's still fun, especially in mid-January with very little else to do.
That's right. We'll do these kind of things from time to time. I mean, basketball kind of takes over now, and last year Trace and Steven kind of spearheaded the basketball thing. But we do have Moonshine Throwdown Week coming up. I mean, I can't get out of here without talking about that. We got 2 games in 4 days between the Toppers and the Herd, starting in Huntington tomorrow night, and I'm sure the place will be rowdy and ruckus, and hope there's a decent contingency of fans that make the trip from Bowling Green. I know Steven was planning on going, so try to pick him out. I mean, he's a pretty nice dude. Get to know Steve, but he was going to make the trip. And if you've never gone to Diddle Arena, I highly recommend making the follow-up trip down to Bowling Green. It is an awesome place to watch a basketball game for sure. So Trace, if you got anything to say it. Otherwise, let's get the heck out of here.
Well, I'm just going to leave it with 2 things. Everybody needs to go on Twitter and sign that petition. You need to spread that word. You need to plug that to the death knell. That's one thing. And the second thing is just go Herds.
Yeah, go Herds. Yeah, we're going to try to get that petition at least. I mean, we're over 11,000 now, and I said the minimum ought to be stadium capacity for the Joan, which is a tad over, 38,000. Mm-hmm. But if we can keep a decent pace from now until at least September, to where more people will probably start getting excited about doing it again, if we can get this thing up to 40, 50, 60,000, it's going to be pretty hard to ignore. And that doesn't have to rely just on Herd fans. I mean, I'm calling on G5 fans across the country to get behind Marshall on this one, because find me a better story for game day that particular week of this particular year, and I'll stand to the side and say you're right. But I guarantee you will not find one. There is not a Power 5 school in the country that would appreciate a visit on that week more than Marshall would that particular week. So please get behind us, all G5ers. Power 5ers, I don't care who you are. If you're a fan of college football, if you're a fan of sports, sign the petition, share it, retweet it, put it on your Facebook. I don't care what you got to do. We want to get this thing as big as we possibly can, so that ESPN and the Conference USA decision makers have no choice but to help us make it happen.
At Drew Gallagher on Twitter, tweet him. He'll appreciate it.
Evidently, what is he? What's
like coordinating title? Producer.
Yeah, coordinating producer. So I guess he's kind of a big deal when it comes to game day locations.
He's the one to probably tag on Twitter.
All right, so follow us on Moonshine TD, or on Twitter at Moonshine TD, at MSTD_podcast. Until next time, we're going to get the heck out of here. So we appreciate you guys for listening. Hope we didn't take up too much of your evening, but well, you stuck around to listen, so you must have enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Later. in the